Welcome to the Art of Listening to Your Body podcast. My name is Dr. Jinong and I'm your host. I'm a cathartic release therapist, professionally trained as an osteopath, psychosomatic therapist, Western acupuncturist, and herbalist. I'm fascinated by the mind-body connection and how your physical body is a manifestation of your emotional state. I help people get unstuck from their chronic pain, whether it be physical or emotional, and live the life they truly desire, grounded in values and driven by purpose. My aim is to create awareness to the underlying emotions behind pain, injury, and disease in the body, as well as behavioural dysfunctions and mental imbalances that present. I do this using a unique blend of Eastern and Western philosophies and a good dose of intuition. Join me to learn more about the story of your body, what different issues may indicate, how to release emotions so that you can prevent problems, as well as inspiring pain story interviews. Lindsay Mustain joins me on the Art of Listening to Your Body podcast today. She is a world-leading authority on executive workplace thought leadership with the deliberate alignment of talent and zones of genius through intentional career design. She's also a 2-time best-selling author and formerly the most visible employee of Amazon. Lindsay has helped 25 of the best and brightest mad genius leaders of the Fortune 500 create intentional career design, a reimagined and bleeding edge HR philosophy that transforms organizations into profit powerhouses. So, like Lindsay says, I was a little bit nervous jumping on this podcast with her. She did provide a little bit of advice for me around my own clinic business. And she is clearly extremely passionate about what she does. I think that all business owners and aspiring business owners can take something away from today's podcast and what Lindsay has to share about HR. And then we do a total switch and listen into Lindsay's pain story. About 6 months ago, Lindsay kindly hosted a clubhouse audio room for me where I shared the work that I did with her audience. And she talked about her hip pain that had needed surgery and painkillers and wasn't really getting anywhere. And before she started telling me the story about it, I asked her if I could give her a interpretation, which I did, which I share later on the podcast. And then 3 months later, I see some big changes happening in her life and ask her how everything's going. And was very happy to hear that what I had shared with her on that clubhouse room, although I wasn't really sharing directly with her for the majority of it, had really, she took it on board and it had really changed her life. Her hip pain, her sciatica was gone, and a whole bunch of other amazing things happened. And it was the start to opening her mind to the mind-body connection, and she's gotten way into energetics now. It's really cool. And yeah, she runs a very successful business over in the States. And I love how we're just able to talk about that, hear her passion, and then also talk about her pain story. So I hope you enjoy listening. And if you feel, reach out to Lindsay. Welcome to the podcast, Lindsay. Thank you so much for joining me. And I'm excited to have your enthusiasm and energy on here for something that probably most people just bang their head against the wall about.
Yes, that's so true. I tend to be not necessarily everyone's favorite person, but I'm enough fun around, I think, that people want to hang out. So I'm glad that we get to have this time together.
Yes. Well, can you tell everyone who you are and what it is you do?
Absolutely. So my name is Lindsay Mustain, and I am the founder of Intentional Career Design. So I work with both high performance CEOs and individuals to align to their zone of genius, where we can create what I call the 4 pillars of career power, which is passion, purpose, pursuit, and profitability. So both for the individual and the organization. So a little bit, do you want me to go a little deeper in that?
Yeah,
I'll tell you a little bit about my background. So I've spent the last 20 years in human resources, and I tend to call myself the Antichrist of HR because I tend to help people who are leaders and CEOs make profit through people rather than getting in the way. And I used to be the most visible employee of Amazon. I actually got more engagement on LinkedIn than Amazon or Jeff Bezos. And I got really, really passionate around helping people have an incredible experience at their employer, knowing that when people love what they do better work. And in turn, we can serve our customers better and impact the bottom line. So I'm a 2 times best-selling author, and I've worked with about 25 of the Fortune 100 or Fortune 500 companies in advising HR groups in how to create intentional career design, which is all about aligning talent to zones of genius. Because when work is easy, effortless, and in flow, we do work that really matters. We talk to something you'd like to talk about. I think your soul's purpose, your reason for being here. And that means that we can do work that goes a lot further and makes a greater impact. So I really tend to work with the bleeding edge industry revolutionaries, the ones who have a big vision of what they want to create for the future. And they know that the way to get there, it's literally at your fingertips, and it's the people that you have around you.
Wow. And I remember you saying to me that a lot of people are scared to come onto your podcast because what you might tell them about their business. And I have to admit that I feel a little bit like that today. I don't know what we're going to dive into, a little bit about your backstory and some emotional history as well. But I do find your take on things really fascinating and inspiring, because when I went to start my clinic business, I did a lot of planning, and I was like, can you really have this business where people just like love the workplace? And I feel like we've had that for, about 4 years, but COVID really shook things up for us. And yeah, the HR piece, like I work with a HR company, but every time they send me something to send to one of my staff, I'm like, this is so heartless. Like, we're dealing with a human here. I cannot communicate this to my team in the way that you've just written it.
It is so, I like to say that we should not be like babysitting or bribing people into doing work. That is one of the biggest pitfalls. I think that we treat people like they're cogs in a machine, like they're line items. And we have to recognize you would never treat a patient like that, right? Like, we see them as a holistic individual with everything they come to the table with. When companies start to treat them like they're, when I say asset or their, human equity or human capital, we diminish their humanity and the gifts that come with that. Because, and I've been a part of some of the most top secret high tech recruiting out there. So the most elusive talent on the planet. And we know that the things that are easily done where we press buttons, and the best example I can give you is, there used to be people who lit street lamps. And now we just have a machine that turns that on, right? And so that will be the future of our workforce. We're going to see this artificial intelligence revolution happen. And that means that all of these tactical aspects will go away. You will not need people to do that. What you will actually need them for is what their humanity brings. So all their inherent gifts are the things that are going to transform the way that we work in the world. And when we start realizing that people have this innate genius in of themselves, helping them to develop them and stop focusing on what they're not good at or treating them like, here's a box, please stay in it. Like, this is the description that you have. Don't do anything more. Don't do anything less. I don't care about your life at home. You work for me and you're lucky to be here. It's a way you've worked for that boss. And it's like their soul, like we like to describe this for our people. They go into work and their soul is being evaporated a little bit at a time. They're selling their soul piece by piece for a paycheck. And it's why, like, there is a massive, it's called the Great Resignation right now that's happening. And it's happening across every employer. So if you're experiencing that, that is okay. I say some churn is good. We had this massive retention during the time of the pandemic. And now that the economy is back expanding, people are likely, right now, the average is about a 3% raise. That's somebody who doesn't work with me, by the way, because I can create somebody 100% raise. But in general, they are going to make a change and be able to up-level their career. They're going to be able to find work that makes it's more flexible. So they're going to those employers that have this more human-centric workforce, is what I call that. They're really focused on creating a place of work that's all around, how do we let people do their best work? They feel safe, they're paid and rewarded appropriately, and they do work that really feels like that matters, because we don't want to grind our whole life and then live for the weekend. We want to have that. There's no work-life balance anymore. It's all about work-life integration. So how do we make it so that somebody is excited when they get up in the morning, they're excited to go do work because what they do matters. That's where they make a difference. And then they come home and they get to be with the people that they love the most. I mean, all of us have had that moment in time. It is possible for you to cultivate that for your workforce. And that's what we look for the leadership that we want to work with, is what we could dub transcendent CEOs, meaning they're past the point of being transformational or transactional. They're to the point where they want to make a contribution, and they know the best way they can do that is by allowing others to also do the same.
Okay. So what are the pitfalls that business owners and CEOs express?
Yeah, I'll say, so the very, very first thing in order to creating a high performance place is you've got to have a vision. So how many of us have gone and created something because we needed it, and it wasn't necessarily it created a short-term solution, but it didn't fit the long-term solution. So like you might need somebody who can help you, I don't know, let's just go really old, you lick stamps. Okay. But when that project was over, you probably didn't need somebody who just lick stamps. And so their usefulness has expired. And that's how most hiring happens for teams, is that we see, this is what I need right now. And then we hire it and we don't think about the vision of what we want. And so there has to be twofold when it comes to creating a vision for your workplace. One, people are way more bought it. So even if you can't compete financially with the big boys in the marketplace, right now, the largest workforce, the demographic that makes up that largest workforce is the millennials. So they're the largest group of the workforce that's actually working today, which is almost kind of scary, right? Like we have this huge gap that between like what previous generations are, and then the ones that actually grew up with technology. They're not interested in the Bentleys. They're not interested. Those are nice things to have, but what they really want are two things. They want flexibility, and they really want to have a purpose. They want to know that what they do matters, and they'll actually be willing to take almost a 50% pay cut in order to do work that matters. So if you come in and say, okay, you're going to lick stamps, that's not going to, motivate them or create a fire for them. And it's a very extreme example. But if you said we're creating this massive project that's creating this movement around wellness in the body, and we know that we can cure disease that's even at, and I'm going to speak for Jen, even though she's not probably going to say this, but she can work with people who are in late stage cancers, and we can save them from that diagnosis from the work that we do. So this message that you're going to be licking stamps for is about getting this information into their hands. And do you see the different vision of what that is? Okay. So that is the difference between somebody who is doing something that's tactical, and then what it's a vision aligned. And then flexibility means that they have the opportunity to work so they can adjust their life. So we give them opportunities to take vacation. They have opportunities to take care of their family, because work should be a means to take care of what's most important in their life. And hopefully work is one of those things. That's what I really want people to have through the intentional career design process, that their work is just as, it makes them feel so worthy of what they're creating in the world, that's just as important to them, or not maybe as much, but nearly equal to the family time that they have. So they don't live for their weekends. They don't live for their off moments, that they know that every day they get to stay in flow when they're at work or when they're at home. So that flexibility is here. But there are a few things that cause people to have, they feel like they matter. So let me give you some of those things. There's really 6 of them that make people feel like what we call the human first idea. So this human-centric workplace. In order to create this, so this vision, you have a workplace. One is certainty, okay? Certainty. And this is where it can be a little painful for people to hear this from me. So just know that we always know we can do better. It's whether or not you choose to do better. Okay. So it's not that I'm judging you. It's that I'm saying, if I give you this information, I ask that you take it and take it to heart, that it's not a judgment on you, but it's a call of action to do better. Okay. So the first one is certainty. All right. And how that represents in the workplace is consistency from leadership. So have you ever been in a place where they go do this? Actually, that's not important. Go do this. You know what? Never mind. Let's go do this. And it's the pendulum swings and there's no consistency. So we want consistency in that vision, and we want consistency in the message that's delivered to our leadership. There shouldn't be, we're fighting. If we had, if you ever had a boss and then their boss and they're totally misaligned and you're just stuck in this middle place where you're playing monkey in the middle, that is a waste of all three of those people's time. Okay. So if we just have alignment in the vision, that's the most important thing. That creates certainty. Okay. The next thing is variety. Okay. So your stamp licker is going to get very tired of licking stamps. And I'm sorry to use this example, but another example of this could be somebody who works in a mailroom. Like the equivalent is something that's very tactical. And those people are incredibly important. Like I think it's really important for you to know the CEO is never the most important part of your business. The CEO is never the most important part. It's the person who's touching your customers, the person who's actually they're interacting face-to-face or over the phone or virtually with your customers. Those are the most important people in your business. They're the ones who are going to drive it. They're going to either make or break it. So if you give somebody, and this is their box, they're told to stay in, and you have I was this person, I was hungry, very hungry to grow. But if you said, this is your box and this is all you get to do, and you should be grateful for being here, we have diminished variety, and variety is the spice of life. Variety is something that gets people excited. So we can have people who do work, and I'm really a big fan of time blocking. So we do work. Switch tasking is actually what happens, not multitasking. So time blocking means that okay, so I am going to do this mailing or this campaign or this, I'm going to administer treatments during this time. We do time blocking. That's important. But if all you did 8 hours a day was the same thing over and over and over and over again, you're actually atrophying the skills that you have. So we need to have variety in order to feel like we're making a difference. Okay. All right. The third thing is significance. Okay. So have you ever been in a place where it feels like it would not matter if you even showed up? It doesn't even matter the work that you do. It feels like people don't even know you exist. You do good work and nobody even cares. That's significance. So how do you fix significance? It's going to be recognition. And recognition for people, it doesn't have to be about, guess what? Lindsay sold a $20,000 package. Let's all go have lunch. That's not what it has to be. It can be, there's somebody who was a top producer, or maybe their preferred form of recognition is just a note that's like, hey, nice work. I'm so proud of the things that you've done. Now, you've got a huge future here. And it's just a private message. Everybody's idea of recognition is going to be a little bit different. So one size fits all recognition programs don't actually fit. They might fit someone like me who would love that public attaboy. That fits my zone. But for the people who are more private, they just want to know that they do work that matters. Okay. So that's significance. All right. Then the fourth thing, and I like to say this is my largest value in the work that I do, which is around love and connection to other people. And people are like, whoa, HR person. Well, I'm the Antichrist of HR. So remember that. I don't give a shit about what traditional HR is, because it's a dying philosophy that manages people like they're either toddlers or they need to be babysat or coddled into doing, or bribed into work. And that's not, if we can give somebody enough intrinsic motivation to do work that they know is meaningful, then we don't have to do that. So when we talk about love or connection, the way you do that is teamwork. Okay. So teamwork, and you don't have to have a big team, but if you have one employee, guess what? You're a team. Okay. So my operations person, this is who I work most closely with. Everyone in my company reports into her in the structure. And we are a complete team. So I'm completely invested in her success. She's completely invested in my success. And here's the other part here is that we either win or lose together. This idea of friendly fire is one of the biggest adversaries in this process. So friendly fire means we take people down. We try to coach them. And just so you know, like the ratio for coaching should be 5 positives to 1 negative. So if you are always hitting your people, so if you have 5 bad things to say, you better come with 20 things that are positive to say to them. Okay. Like or 25, I guess that would be the right number. You would need to have that much. So when we're talking about teamwork, one of the things that we can look at is Gallup survey. Gallup is the largest human capital institute. And they have the best data points. And they say one of their employee engagement surveys question says, do I have a best friend at work? And the reason why here is that they need to know they're not alone. If they're working in a vacuum, it's kind of like solitary confinement. It's not good for anybody. They need to have that teamwork. And so that's the next piece, is having teamwork and connected. They have somebody at work they can come to, and it feels like there's a relationship. So people who go and they ever had anybody who checks in and checks out, they're not a believer in your vision. They're not moving it forward. They're actively disengaged from work. Those people are not impacting your bottom line in a positive way that somebody who truly is engaged will. Okay. Number 5, is growth. All right. So what does growth looks like? Well, it means a chance to develop, to ascend. So if you said, okay, I'm going to give you this job and there is absolutely no chance that this job will ever change. Here is your box. I want you to sit in it. Do not move. Do not try to do better. You'll never get a chance to grow. How enticing do you think somebody is going to, enticed is somebody going to feel to join your organization and to stay? They're not. Okay. So like, this is where people are like, why? You're so lucky to have a job. Again, they're not lucky to have a job. You are lucky to have the talent that you are. When you change that paradigm and you start valuing people for their contribution, it changes their entire perspective. Okay. And most people, we've been conditioned to feel lucky for our work, but the people who are the best players out there, the most elusive talent on the planet, they have people who are fighting over them. Your people are going to see this too. This great resignation means that there are so many more opportunities. And that's why companies are bleeding talent. They're bleeding it because they don't have some of these pieces. So how do you make sure people want to stay? Well, you give them a chance to grow, to develop, to ascend. So early on in my career, I remember being told, you're going to have a chance to go to this management role. And I was so excited. And then the moment I got qualified for that, they're like, actually, no. And I was like, wait, what? You told me I could do this. So the moment you take that away, it's kind of like taking the cheese away from the mouse. They don't have anything to go for. Okay. So growth is next on the list. Okay. And then the last one is contribution. So, if you want somebody to feel like they can reach contribution, they have to feel like they make a difference. So this goes back to that vision. They have to have that vision, and they have to realize that the skills that they have or that they're developing, AKA growth, will allow them to contribute to the workforce. If we do that, then we can find these 6 pieces. So that's certainty, variety, significance, love and connection, growth, and contribution. If you do all those things, that's what people have for their true human needs. And that's how it manifests inside of the workforce.
Yeah, I love the 6 human needs. Where I get a little bit stuck, and I'll be mindful about what I communicate on this, is I get it. And I know that for myself in the workplaces I've been in and where I am right now, how do you get your team to align to this? Because I feel like I've got the most amazing team, but we're also in a service industry. And I know I'm saying, but I'm different, but you're probably saying, no, you're not. It's like, well, the money does come in when the clients come in the door, but I'm always very focused on, the energetics of money. You do the work that you love, the people are going to get value out of that, and the money will flow. And, there's room to grow for growth. Like, do you want to be part of the business? Do you want to increase your prices? Like, what happens when there's this kind of disconnect of, well, you want more money, but yet nothing else is coming in the door. So it's got to come from somewhere.
So this is where one of the things that I find that's really, really important that CEOs tend to not see or feel like it's a secret is radical transparency inside of a business. And so a lot of times, one of the things that people don't necessarily share is where is the business performing and where are they not? So, for example, I had one time somebody asked for a raise when they hadn't done really great work, and it wasn't a part of the business that I wanted to expand. And I don't think that I had done a good enough job actually explaining that this was something that had happened. So I said, unfortunately, that's something we can do. And then if this part of the business picks up, that's something we can evaluate. Here is what we can do to drive that a little bit more. Would you like to be a part of it so that you can be responsible for the growth of this in adding to that bottom line piece so that we could, in fact, increase? And so that's the one thing that there is always going to be a misalignment. Like there's going to be a time where talent outgrows you and you outgrow talent. And I say talent because I think it's really important to realize these are all human beings and we need to appreciate them as such. And I don't think that you obviously have any problem with that. But when somebody is not aligned or they want something without doing the work, that might mean that their talent has expired for your organization. And we like to use this like bless and release idea that it's an honest conversation about, okay, so this is where we're at. Like if they understand the honesty of it, here's where we're trying to go. Here, if you want this, here's how we're going to need to get there. Are you willing to be a part of it? And if they're not, then that's when we say, okay, so what do we do next? And we come to an agreement that says, here's the expectation for us to move forward, for you to get your goals and for me to hit mine. But it always has to be a win-win. When I said, we either win together, we lose together, it kind of has to be that idea. And there is a time where there's going to be people who are so detrimental inside of your business. And typically people don't wake up and they're like, how do I just do a bad job today? That's not usually what people do. Yeah. But they have other circumstances in their life that have impacted, they have, they might be going through a really difficult personal situation, or their desires for their goals in their life have changed. And it's, we have to realize that we need to think like we're a business, we're going to make the best decisions for us as a business. We also need to recognize that employees are in their own business, the business of me. And so if they're going to make the best decision for them, and it's not our best decision to bribe people to stay on board. And it's also, but it is our best decision to help them align to the vision that we have so that we can work together for it. And if they want to be a part of it, then that's great. And if they're not, then we just need to find a way to offboard and replace that with a talent that is going to want to do that.
Yeah, I have to agree. Like I'm always, when people want to move on, I'd have to say the staff that we have had move on, it's been, different circumstances, not necessarily not enjoying the workplace, thankfully, but it's like, I wish you well. And I just know that your path is going to be what it is. And I'm glad to have played a part in that. But I do agree. What I feel is that we need to be clear on our desires so that we can be led towards them, not an expectation that someone is going to just open the path for you.
That's true. And there's going to be people there are, when we look at succession planning, when we're thinking about the future, we have a couple different ways that we look at talent. So somebody is like an A player. They might be, somebody who's highly motivated, so really attractive, like they could be poached really easy. They're making those pathways for us without any effort. And then we might have B players, and B players are people who might be really good at their job, but they're not necessarily going to be somebody who's be sought after or looking to leave. And so those are the kind of the balance between, so we want to have that balance of somebody who doesn't necessarily, we can't have all A players, because if everybody was trying to be hyper competitive, we create kind of a dog eat dog workforce. So we need lots of different styles in the workforce. The best way to kind of look at your existing workforce, and I do not recommend this as a hiring assessment, it can get you in a lot of trouble. So I'm going to say that caveat, but it's called a DISC profile, and it talks about 4 different measures. And I've been around it for a long time, so I'll use the first one is D for dominance. I is it's influence, and then S is support, and then C is compliant. So for me, high I, high influential, very extroverted, high D. Okay. So really big driver. Okay. So if you put me into a role, and this is where the alignment of the roles, if you put me into a role where I'm really responsible for compliance, which has been a big part of my job, well, I'd rather poke my eyeball out. That would be, it's not good work. I might be able to do work that's like I talk about being in your zone of excellence. I'm really good at it. Does it fuel my soul? Absolutely not. It literally makes me want to run away and cry. So, but what I do need is to have people who balance that. So people who are good support and people who are compliant. And that is the perfect example of me and my operations person. She has some of those skills that I don't have. So we mesh well. So we do want to make sure that we make a really well-balanced team, but it is important when we have a misalignment, especially when we think about the jobs that we have, we do need to figure out, is there a place for them inside of our company that makes sense, that they would both be happy and that we would feel good about, or is this a time to, again, bless and release?
Yeah. So I use the DISC profile, and I use doshas and a few other personality profiles for admin and practitioner staff, because I think that a lot of people do fall in the trap of, well, I just want more people like me. It's well, if you get more people like you, they're going to compete with you. They're going to want to make all the decisions, think they can do everything better than you. So it's really having that complementary team and the different personalities and understanding one another's personalities as well. But what were you saying about the DISC profile could actually land you in a lot of trouble if you used it?
And I'm going to speak because I'm mostly limited to the United States, but anytime when you have the threshold's around 50 people, you get into a lot of extra governance. And so compliance for legal, wage and hour laws and fair hiring practices, that happens around that point. And the DISC profile is not meant to be, it's not validated for assessing talent. And it would be like saying, okay, because you're good at Excel, we're not going to hire you, or we are going to hire you. Mm-hmm. And if that skill set is, again, licking stamps, how does that have anything to do with So you have to have there has to be a justifiable way. And then we're looking for what's called disparate impact. And so that means that we might impact one population in particular protected groups adversely versus, and just the regular, white guys under 40. That would be the baseline control group that tends to not have a lot of challenges. They do in of themselves, but in general, that's the group that will have the least amount of bias, whereas other groups. So that's where it can be. And I'll just say that this is not I use this wording really big time because I've seen hundreds of millions of dollars in lawsuits in this. So I just recommend you really very careful around this one. It's good to use when you can assess some of these things if you just think about that when you're talking to someone, what are they good at? What are their strengths are, kind of align those without going through the formal assessment process. This tends to be because there are ideal archetypes for different roles, somebody who, and there's exceptions to every role, but somebody who's an accountant typically isn't going to be a high. There's not typically that, but there are very influential accountants out there. So you just have to, make sure you're picking and choosing for your team, but a good variety. So diversity in opinion, thought, look, experience, and demographics in every way actually aids your team. When people are different than you, we disrupt what's called groupthink. And I wrote a whole article about this around the idea about how the Black Lives Matter movement could actually save us from the economic collapse. That when you actually add diversity into your to your team, your bottom line on average increases 19%. So that's idea instead of having, which if you look at all of corporate America, all of our boards are basically white dudes with a couple of token woman. And that's why we see those companies tend to atrophy and mature and decline because they haven't introduced the idea. They have a whole group of yes men and they haven't actually tapped into the genius that's available when we bring in those diverse opinions.
Yeah, right. So when you're working with CEOs and executives, what are you doing with them and their teams?
Yeah. So one of the things that we tend to look at is I'm looking for 3 different measures. So the 3 principles are, the first one is the human-centric workplace. And so I talked about the 6 human needs, but I also have 10 contributing factors that go into what the human-centric workplace looks like. And it means that somebody who comes into work for you will be able to tap into all the sources of well-being. If you want to check into that, there's this 5 sources of well-being. It's from Gallup. That's a really great way for you to look at it. But there's a couple other things, which is we align to our zone of genius, that we have the opportunity to do work that matters. There's things that are going to be inside there. So we're looking for these 10 factors. So that's the first thing. It's the baseline measure, because you can't really help people align to their zone of genius if you don't actually establish a workplace where the environment thrives, right? So if you want to grow, a plant or a rose, you make sure the soil has the right environment. So the right water, the right sunlight, the right pH balance. The same thing goes with your people. Your people are all roses here in this analogy. So if they're not thriving, the first thing we have to change is the environment, okay? The next stage that we're looking at is the intentional career design alignment. And so when I talk about intentional career design, this is the future state. This is the bleeding edge HR revolution that I'm championing, which is we stop treating people like policies and procedures. And HR is this glorified gatekeeper who says yes or no and decrees what you should do. My job is not to help you to get in your way. My job is to help empower you to make the best decisions for your business to increase your profitability. That's not what HR is seen as. And I come from a background where I've worked with massive companies, but I come from operations. So I understand how business runs, and I run a business myself. So my job is not to make your life harder. My job is to make sure that what we create is a workforce that is engaged and that we have fair practices so they can do their best work. So in turn, we can actually make bottom line, and then that becomes a virtuous cycle. So the intentional career alignment talks about, and there's really 4 places here. What I'm looking for is, you've probably all heard of strength finders, and strength finder says we should stop focusing on our weaknesses and start focusing on our strengths. I want to take that to the next degree. So there's superpowers or zones of genius. Zones of genius is where the work that is transformational, the people who are the best and brightest, the industry leaders, they're staying in their zone of genius. And it is less than a 1% zone, very, very small, which means that there's lots of room for geniuses inside of your business. When we look at this intentional career design, there are 4 zones of genius. 4 zones, I should say. The first one is the zone of incompetency. I'll give you my zone of incompetency. Mine is around checking my email. I am not good at it at all. I am terrible at it. I don't even get allowed to look at it. It was one of the first things that we took off my plate, because intentional career design, We do that inside of my business. I do not do work that actually causes me to be unsuccessful. Okay. That's the big key when we talk about incompetency. All right. Then we have the zone of competency. I'll give you the example of the zone of competency for me. I'm pretty competent at scheduling things on my calendar. So that's the time I do get to touch something in Google Suite. I'm not really that good. I'm kind of hit or miss on it. I can send the wrong things. Jen is familiar with this example of me not being very good at it. But that's where like my competency is right there. Okay. But I'm not going to be awesome at it, but I can get it done. We're all going to have work that falls into that zone. We're going to all have things that we're going to need to do that falls into that area. But our goal is never to stay in that area the majority of the time. Okay. The next is the zone of excellence. And this tends to be where we hire people. We want them to be excellent at what they do and a variety of things. So I am excellent at HR compliance, but does that make, if you gave me a job where I just did HR compliance all day long, I would find the next job as quick as I could, and I would be on that next train. So you have to be really careful around the zone of excellence. Just because someone is good doesn't mean that that's what they want to do. And that's where we get to say, oh, but you're so good, or you become so invaluable in this one thing that you can never be replaced. That's where we get this zone of excellence where it's like a place where people die in. Okay. But there's another place, and this place is where work is fun, easy, in flow. We do work that matters. We come up with revolutionary ideas. It's the bleeding edge concepts. You want to go to Mars like Elon Musk. They're operating in a zone of genius. Okay. The zone of genius is that less than 1% thing that makes you different than everyone else in the world. And there's something that you have. Every single person has this, whether or not you believe me or you've discovered it. Those are two different things. But you have something that is so incredibly powerful. And there's a reason I really, truly believe that we are all called to come to earth and walk this place and this body and this humanity to make a contribution. And that's your zone of genius. And that's what intentional career design is all about. So when I see the replacement of human resources, what I say is we stop trying to manage the traditional human resources and we allow people to operate in zones of genius more than 50% of the time. That's the goal. And that means that we do work that actually moves the needle with a much smaller workforce that does a greater impact. So that's the goal of being in the zone of genius through intentional career design. Now, the last thing here is that, so I've got the right environment. That's the human-centric workforce. And then I have the intentional career design. What's next? Well, unless you have a leader that's actually allowing this to happen, none of this will become fluid. And so that's what we call the transcendent CEO. All right. So I was just listening to one of a very successfully luxury influencer that we work with. And they were talking about one of the principles of luxury icons is that they have the best and brightest in the team and they work as a transcendent CEO. And we're so excited to be featured in that way. When we talk about the transcendent CEO, there's a kind of an evolution of how CEOs manage. And what I mean by that is we tend to, however you've ended up being a CEO, sometimes people are really, really extroverted. They're really strong leaders. Most of the time it doesn't happen that way. Most of the time that they've just been really good at what they do. And so that means that they've started their own business and then they've kind of created a hodgepodge team. So they're very revolutionary, they're visionary in their role, but they aren't necessarily good leaders. And I want to deconstruct that a little bit and say, leadership is a learned skill, just like anything. Okay. It's like, once you get at it, it's a skill you have to continue to reinforce. It's something that you have to work on. It's never going to be done. So there's multiple different leadership styles, and the 4 of them I'm going to walk you through. So in the very beginning, we're all beginning on this path of developing our leadership style. It's the authoritarian. Okay. And the authoritarian is all around task management, which is do as I say. All right. And then you come back and then I'm done. So let's check in with me now. Go and do as I say. Right. So I want you to think of like first grade. That is really the authoritarian leadership style. The teacher is the leader and the children in the class are the employees. That's the authoritarian leadership style. So there's very little empowerment. People aren't allowed to expand beyond what they want to do. They're told what to do. They come back. It's very task management. So it's very tactically driven. After that is the authoritative zone, okay, which says, okay, all right, you've got enough. This is where my kids are now. You can make decisions. You can make decisions. Now, you're probably going to get penalized when you make the wrong decisions, but you're okay to go ahead and make a decision. So that's the next evolution. The next stage is transformative. Okay, so this says you can make decisions, and now you know the framework to be successful in making those decisions independently. And this is where everyone loves to be like, this is where we want to be, the transformative leader. Okay, but that's not good enough for me. Okay, there is a stage after that, and that's the transcendent CEO, which says, I, as a CEO, work in my zone of genius. And let me be really clear. Your zone of genius is, again, that 1%. You are not the do-it-all. We look at span of control, which is how many people report into you. If you are the utility player on your team, meaning you just come in and you play wherever you're at, you are not being a transcendent CEO. You work in your zone of genius as a transcendent CEO. And I make decisions that are in my alignment with my zone of genius. You can make decisions that are in alignment with your zone of genius. You know the framework to be successful, and I empower you to be in that zone of genius and make your greatest contribution. That is the transcendent leader. And there are a lot of different pieces that go into this play. It's a lot of trust. It's a lot of mentoring your staff. Now, I'm not saying you should just, hey, hi, welcome on to the team. Let me push in the deep end. And now here we're being transcendent and you're working your zone of genius. We haven't even established what that is inside of this company. So you have to know that's a situational leadership model. You have to know where the growth of your person is. But when they're at the point of actually reaching competency, so true competency, we wanted them to be in that transcendent leadership place. Okay. We want them to have that ability to stay in that zone of genius. So that's what we're really looking for is how do we get them to doing work that's fun, easy, and joyful? They get to do things that expand their skills. They're continuing to climb up that 6 basic human needs. Because if you're constantly fighting fires, you're never going to be able to create next level ascension for your business. You need to protect your time like it's money. And that means surrounding yourself with the people who do the work that you don't need to be doing. So like I can build funnels like nobody's business. I actually enjoy it. I really enjoy it. Like I wouldn't say it's a zone of genius. It's a zone of excellence. I'm really good at it. Is it the best use of my time? 100% no. Okay. 100% not a best use of my time. However, in a pinch, you better believe I can jump in there. So that's where you have to really stay in that, realize that you have your zone of genius and you need to make sure your people stay in their zone of genius. And that doesn't mean they're not going to do tactical work, but as the CEO, you should be in that zone of genius 75% of the time. Your teams, the rest of the time, we want to stay around 50% until they get to be true tactical players. And that's where we want to make sure that those people don't feel like they're stuck in a box. They have the chance to ascend and grow.
Yeah, I love it. And you've just spoken a lot about what I feel. And I even said recently, it's like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm just constantly fighting fires. Whereas I have the vision, but I can't create the vision when I'm fighting fires. So where is my energy going? And then it was back to like, right. Handing things back to my managers. And I know if they listen to this, they're probably like, yeah, but you don't give it to us completely. So I really had to learn going from a sole practitioner to building a team that no one's going to do it like me, but I'm fine with that.
Yes. And that's where I'm like, they can be, I'll even say that there is nobody who's going to be Lindsay Mustain, but there are people who are pretty darn close. And there are people who turns out to be, who have done work that I thought I couldn't outsource until I coached and mentored them. And now they can do it better than I can. So I think you need to validate assumptions here along the way, because we can, like, if you never want to be in the place of, like, our goal is to, as CEOs, is to grow. And I'm not talking necessarily about you, but every person who's listening, but to grow. And so that means that we're not going to want to be doing everything. Like I love doing the content for my business. I love that. But at some point that's going to be somebody else's job, right? Like that's gonna be somebody else's job to create the content. I'll speak about it likely, but if I ever sold my business, I would need to be able to step away from that. So that's where we have to find the way, this next, then Lindsay Jr., I guess I would say, what I'm looking for. And as I start to let things go, and it's hard when it's your baby, we'll let things go and watch them, and I coach them and I watch them get to improve. And then they come and they bring things that I hadn't even considered. Yeah. And that's where like that established, they might be in the zone of excellence, but this might be an opportunity for zone of genius. And that's where that established and that intentional growth that we're looking for really happens. But if you take the time, when we're fighting fires, a lot of times what we can do is we're saying, oh, I'll just do it myself. Yeah. And that thing, instead, like, okay, so I could spend 5 minutes doing it myself, or I could spend 15 minutes training this person. And then this ever happens again, I can give it back to them. Yeah. So we have to kind of weigh ourselves and just make sure that our default isn't like, just give it back to me. I don't even want to deal with it. And I do that with my kids. And I'm working really hard to be like, listen, I know it's really hard to tie your shoes. Let me just help you. Okay. This is the example, but they're never going to figure out how to tie their shoes if I don't let them.
Yeah.
So that's the best way for you to give the chance. And there may be people who are successful and there may be people who aren't, and you might have to take it back and you might let them grow and develop. And then you might give them another chance to stretch, but those stretch assignments allow them to get to take the next step in their career.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people find it hard because it's like, well, I've got to spend that 50 minutes or those 10 hours to teach someone how to do this. But once you've taught them, you don't have to do it anymore. And I just love it. There are some things that I have no idea how to do that my team can do for me.
Isn't that amazing? There are things where now in my team where I'm like, wow, like most of the time I want to learn something hands-on, but I realize like this just in time learning model is way more efficient. Like I don't need to learn everything. I just need to learn. Like sometimes I'll be like, I got this. I'm going to give it to you. How do you feel about that based on what we know, what you like to do and what you're excited about? And if they're on board, then I'm happy to give it. And I don't need to know, but I also feel like it's very important as a leader that you are willing to step in and do any work at any level when that person needs support. So like I've never been beyond, I am never too good to step into my people's shoes. And there's nothing I would ask them to do that I wouldn't be willing to do myself. That's another key trait of that transcendent CEO is that you are aligned to your people and you know that you are not the most important player in your business. The people who actually are the ones who are administering the work.
Oh, absolutely. Well, running a clinic, we have linen and it's like, get in there and fold the linen if you need help with it. And I try and, let all the staff know that when you do come on board, that is something that it would be great. It's not an expectation, but it would be great if you can help out. And that just, you show up as a team player just by doing something like folding the linen. It's so appreciated by the admin staff who ultimately are the gate people to, clients coming to see you.
That's exactly it. And this is what I'll also say, your administrative staff, wherever they are, they're the most under-respected and the most important grease on the wheels to any business. So never take off the administrative staff, honor them and respect them because they do some of the hardest work with the least amount of appreciation. So I love that you think like that.
Oh, what else do you have to share with us around intentional career design?
Well, one of the things I'll give you one last little tidbit that I think is really important is that as a CEO, one of the things we get caught in the busyness of things, in the busyness. And in order for you to be able to create that next level ascension for your business, if you want to have that next idea, you have to have time where you are not actively scheduled to be doing or in front of somebody. So I want to talk about white space here because as a visionary inside of a business, you really have to, that transcendent CEO piece has to be that we spend the time to cultivate what's next. And this is like, when we look at the people like I'll give you an example here, Amazon and Microsoft, two companies I'm really familiar with. Now, Microsoft has had the added advantage of being the big player always from the start of time, basically inside of the technology space. But they were outpaced by people who had an expanded vision. And so now when I look at it, I see Microsoft is a very mature organization. They have some parts and some startups that are very, very young and they're trying to grow, but it's like the Bing versus Google. Like Bing is never going to be Google. Google surpassed it so far that we don't even say like, I'm going to go Bing something or I'm going to go search for something. You say, I'm going to go Google something. Okay. So when you have that kind of category king status, it's very hard to unseat people. But how it happens is when the visionaries get in their space and they see these other future and vision. So that future vision is how we unseat the category king. So wherever you're at in your space, hopefully you're in a category of one. This is that category king. Like I'm intentional career design. Guess what? There's nobody else who does intentional career design. So therefore I'm the best at it. You want to be like that in what you do. But if you want to compete with the big boys, that's a share of your competition market share, then you need to allow the space. So not scheduling yourself back to back and grinding it out, that's an important part of staying in your zone of genius. Okay. And especially if you're the CEO, you need to have this for everybody. 2 hours a day, so there's the 80-20 rule. The Pareto principle says that 20% of our results come from, or 80% of our results come from 20% of our time. The 20% of the time, that's 2 hours a day. If you can give people the space to have 20% of the time to be creative, to plan, to create strategy, that's transformational practice in your business that will elevate and ascend to the next level.
Interesting. Wow, that's
hard
great.
to do. Hard to pull off.
No, you've given me lots of food for thought. And one thing you said to me earlier, though, was like, hey, this does mean you've got to work at it. You've got to put your energy towards it if you want to turn things around.
And there's never a lost hope unless you give up, right? So, and then the people who are the right people for your business, if you're transparent with them and tell them how you're feeling and what you're seeing and what you'd like to see and paint that vision, you're going to find that people will want to get in the right seats and they'll want to help you row in the right direction. So it is one of the things for the right people that will happen. And the people who are not the right people, they'll identify themselves as well, whether or not they raise their hand or they stop rowing. You'll get to find that out too. And sometimes I know that's a hard lesson to learn, but it's better to find out than to be like constantly trying to get people, like that bribing idea. Like when people, I'll give you an example. There was like an engagement practice that people had, and they're planting succulents. Like planting succulents is not going to save your business. Okay. It's not going to make people engaged. It's not going to drive your bottom line. Like, yeah, okay. It's fun and cool and kitschy, but how about doing work that truly matters? That's what's going to fire the fuel and the passion behind the people who are in your business.
Amazing. My gosh. So we're going to make a little bit of a transition.
I'm happy to, because this is where we get into some of the deeper stuff.
Yeah, but this is so valuable and we could like cut this right here. So if someone wants to just like investigate, you had so many good key points along the way, but if someone wanted to find you for your intentional career design and learn from you, where can they find you?
Yeah, the best place to go, you can visit me on LinkedIn. It's I'm a LinkedIn kind of guru. So you can go to linkedin.com/Lindsay Mustain or Lindsay@talentparadigm.co and message in if you're needing a little bit of help or guidance in this aspect.
Cool. But you will not check your emails. Someone else.
No, you can guarantee that you are going to get a member of my dream team.
I think this is something that I need to hand over because I get hundreds of emails and I sit there saying, I wish someone would be in my inbox and just tell me the ones that I need to respond to.
Oh, I have to look at my email. It's to the point where they screen share to make sure it's not on the screen because it gives me anxiety because when I see stuff, so it allows me to be like, we do it. So how I do it, Jen, is twice a day is when we check emails and for my team. So we're not always constantly monitoring. And that's what our out of office says all the time. And then they come to me once a day and we just download what the heck actually needs to be responded. They give me a quick blurb. I respond. And that way I don't get the emotions or the challenges. I just get, what do I need to respond? And they create the response for me.
Oh, wow. That's really good.
Yeah. It will save you.
So, yeah, I guess you operate at a really high level. You work with high level people. How do you do it when there is stuff that happens in your life and you've had some pretty significant things happen in the previous years and more recently for you in your life? And yeah, this leads into you hosted a clubhouse room for me to speak and share to your audience. And what I say is you learned by osmosis. And then I heard that you took a lot away from that and you're messaging me saying, this happened, that happened. So I'll let you tell the story. What was your physical ailment? What has happened in your life? And we'll go from there.
It is just amazing to get to, and it's just so awesome to have friends that, have something so powerful. And I love that. So, this story is a little bit harder to share, but at the time when I had, and I don't even think I knew what, how powerful what I would learn would, no, I definitely didn't know, but I didn't know that I even would come close to addressing some of the things that had happened in my life. But I'll just tell you what the manifestation in my body was I had I'm not a spring chicken, but I'm in my 30s and I had a lot of tightness in my hip and I had a spasm that wrapped around in my hip flexor that caused sciatica pain and just incredible pain all the time, to the point where like I needed therapy, physical therapy. I probably needed other therapy too, but physical therapy is what I mean. And I was taking a muscle relaxer and I was having to visit the doctor on a pretty regular frequency. And I was just in excruciating pain all the time. And it was, I didn't know that it was kind of brought to me that it was a chronic condition. It wasn't going to be something I was going to get over. It wasn't going to be something like it might get a little bit better, might get a little relief, but it wasn't going to like get better. It wasn't going to resolve, which is a very depressing thing to just give somebody a sentence that, hey, you're going to be in pain all this time. So
is that what you were told?
Yeah. That it was not like here's going to be some muscle relaxers and hopefully you won't need them as much, as it gets better. But it was definitely like, this is it. This is what's happened. This will be part of it. Like the spasm going to be here and it's going to be painful for you. And I'm sorry. Mm. And if you want it to go better, then you should probably get in more intense side of physical therapy. And I was like, okay. All right. So I tried a few things like yoga and I got an infrared sauna, which I actually highly recommend. I love my infrared sauna. Like that thing is the bomb. But it was very much about treating the symptoms and not the root cause, as I would find out. So when I hosted the clubhouse room with you, I had no idea what we were really going to get into because I didn't necessarily understand the work that you did. And so when I came in there, I talked about this this physical pain that I had in my body. And I'm not sure how it came up, if you had already known or what, but one of the things that had happened to me that I had just come out of in the last couple months was my brother was he was stabbed to death in 2019, and it was incredibly grisly, just horrific. And the person who had to take care of everything with it was me, including the most recent thing that happened at the very end of last year was the trial that where we went through the sentencing of the person who killed him. And it was a very emotionally challenged thing. And when we kind of examined this a little bit more, it was very much about that was something that had kind of physically shown up for me in pain was inside of my right hip. And that was how we kind of got started on this journey. So it's in talking just in that and giving some tips to triage.
Yeah, I think what it was, you just told me that you had hip pain. And I said, well, just so that you know there's something in this, before you tell me the details of what might have happened in your life, this is what the hip represents. And it was a lot, it's a sacral chakra, which is a lot around relationships in life. And it was your right side. And so I said it can have to do with males in your life being the masculine side, but also around masculine energy of you. Possibly, I imagine after hearing you speak about being very driven, processed, analytical, having all the strategy. But yeah, just thinking about males in your life, like father, brother, uncles, just your current relationship as well. And just, I always say to people as I speak, do you feel any sensation in your body? And then it ended up being that I was talking to someone else in the group, but there was a lot of similarities. We started talking about the doshas and how different Ayurvedic doshas hold on to emotions and how they present, whether it be with like hoarding things or holding on to weight as well. So yeah, keep going. Did this hip pain come on afterwards, or did you have it for years before as well?
No, it was, it happened. So the time from when he died through the trial time, that was when the pain kept just increasing in intensity. And so then I ended up having surgery to help with something, and it actually made it worse. And so it got really highly triggered right at the same time as everything else. So I think it was just like this pressure, like this intense pressure all together. And so yeah, that was when it started to show up. And I mean, it was excruciating. I mean, like if you've had sciatica pain, like it's hard to walk, much less like sit or do anything. And so I spent a lot of time like just trying to figure out how to ease some of that pain. And so everything I did was just like any kind of treatment I could get my hands on to that. So I took, when we were talking, I didn't know that was that. I didn't even have any idea that like, I had no idea. And I would consider myself a little bit more of a new age nerd. So, for me, I seeing like this energetics with the physical body, like the two combined, like it was just a really new arena for me to learn about. And so when you talked about it, you're like, what, have you had anything inside this? And I was like, oh my God, yes. And oh my God, yes. And oh my God, yes. That was what really, really changed for me. And so one of the things that you had initially told me that I still love, it scares the crap out of my kids when I do it, is just giving it a good scream. So, and I probably could learn this lesson and do better for my kids even, which is trying to hold back, because I am a very emotional person. I think that's just true of like my nature. And so I try to act really strong. I try to really hold on. I try to keep the surface calm, even if I'm totally freaking out on the inside, and letting out some of that stuff. Like when I feel now, anytime and I never feel tension on my left side, like ever, it's always on my right side. So I'm always like, what am I doing? Or I'm forcing or being masculine, or I'm pulling things in. Whenever I feel that now, I just go and I scream the living bejesus out. Like I go into my sauna and I'll just scream, or I'll go into my car and I'll just scream, and I'll warn my kids, like, I'm going to go scream. Just know that's what's happening. And that thing, that releasing of whatever it is that you're holding on to, is kind of like letting sandbags go, I think is how I've described it, right? Like the things, you just start letting it go, and whatever, like, I don't know if it's energy. This is where you'll probably want to chime in with some of that, but whatever it is, it's like it just uncoils. Instead of all of this tension and all these things. And I knew this from yoga, that we hold, like, I have cried in pigeon pose. Like I know that you hold emotion in your hips. That was not a surprise to me, but the fact that it could create and show up in a different way, like the screaming piece was it. And then you asked me to talk to my brother about what was going on. And it's a very strange practice. Let me try that again. It was an amazing practice, but it was a very strange concept for me. That, and I don't think I've told you this part, Jen, but one of the things that happened for me when my brother passed away was I actually started hearing him. And so whether you want to believe that or not, if you're listening, it was what guided me through the entire journey. It was how I knew how he passed away. It's how I knew what his experience was when his body left this earth. But I really had, I had decided that wasn't real. I was just making it up in my mind. And it was something where I just started to listen, and I can hear him talk through, and it resolved all of the guilt and shame and the things that I should have done in his life, where I wasn't a good enough sibling, or I didn't protect him, or I didn't do all the things. And just the incredible amount of guilt and just grief, and how awful it was. That was just sitting inside of that. And so that began this conversation where I really, like, I talk to my brother all the time now. I like to say we have a better relationship now than we did before. Wow. Yeah, it's been pretty powerful. I've had some mediums who talk about him being with me and the things. It's been an incredible gift. And one of the things that you helped me was actually having that conversation, realizing that I could share the things and let go of the shame and the grief that I had because the grief was not necessarily, the grief of loss is still there, obviously, but the grief around the things I should have done, the things that I didn't say, the things that way I didn't show up, or what I, like, all of the list of thousands of things that I should have done that I was able to resolve, and just having that conversation. And so I went from, and this is just, again, I just spent time talking to you and just having this, and my pain went away. And I probably spent about 2 weeks really actively doing this work before I don't have pain at all. Like I might get some tightness when I'm doing certain things. Like I sat on an airplane for 7 hours, like that got a little tight, but like when I go up, guess what I did? I went and screamed a little bit and I was fine afterward. So I find that the first thing I do is just go to this modality, because I don't understand how it works. And I've just stopped questioning. If it works, it works. You know, it's kind of like wearing socks on the Super Bowl. If you got magic socks that make sure your team win, like, it doesn't matter. It just works. Right. So that's how I really look at it now. And I found that, for me, it's been incredibly powerful. So when I was talking to Jen, I was like, I just want you to know what you did for me. And she's like, oh my gosh, are you kidding? And I was like, yeah, you're magic.
This is really the first time I'm hearing the details of it. And we agreed that we would jump on a podcast with one another and just talk in the moment. I don't like stuff to be scripted, but yeah, we didn't have much contact after that. We were both really busy doing our things, even though we shouldn't be busy, creating white space. But yeah, we were caught up doing our own things. And then I don't know if we're able to delve into this as well, but you've had something more recently happen with your relationship. And then and that's when I messaged you. I was like, oh my gosh, Lindsay, like what's happened since we spoke? And it was not only the stuff with your brother and your hip. And that's when you told me my hip pain's gone. I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to find out more, because we didn't really converse. I shared a little bit with you, and then it was over to coaching the other person that was in the room. So that is the power of this work.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I keep forgetting that part. But I want to say a couple of things happened for me afterwards. I feel like a lot of so I was carrying, I probably lost about 30 pounds, and I didn't do anything except for this work. I mean, I really didn't. So it was like the moment I stopped holding on to the shame, my body just because I feel like a lot of times it's a way of hiding ourselves from of that. So that's kind of the way my thoughts. So that was one thing. So I look better now at 27 than I do at 37. That's the big change.
Well, the thing with the weight is that it's all dependent on where do we hold the weight, and usually it's covering or protecting the emotions that are too hard to process and deal with. And I just wanted to touch back with your brother and grief of loss and death, and it's just actually letting people know it's okay to be angry. It's okay to have regret around the things that you didn't do. It's not necessarily around the event that happened. It can be so many other things, but just express it. And just because they have passed away and they're not in this physical world, you can still talk to them, and you're not a crazy person. Like, some people will hear the voice, they will have the smell. And I think, some people have incredible senses, but they do get a little bit scary at times. And so it is finding the people that you can talk about it with. And that's where I love just whatever's on your mind, just say it. And it's the verbal process that's really powerful, and then having him speak back to you. So I love hearing that you were able to resolve so many things, not just around the event of his murder, but everything else prior to that too. And that you noticed such a big physical shift.
Yeah, I think it was even more powerful, the stuff that I had been holding on to before, because I don't know that I could have talked to him while he was still here. I think that was, you've talked about how you can go ahead and say the things. Maybe you can have that conversation and maybe you can't, but I don't think I could have had that conversation until now. And it's one of the things he's kind of shared with me, is that he played his part in that. But the other thing was that I had been, and this one's a little hard because it was just finalized on Monday, but I ended up, finalizing my divorce from my husband, and he's still an incredible good friend of mine, but I realized I was holding on to a lot of shame with feeling like a failure in some of that. And I'll tell you, the moment that I just finally said it to the world, where I said, we have a beautiful relationship and two amazing kids, but we're not going to be together anymore. And that doesn't mean that we're not going to be family or that we don't love each other, but that we're no longer going to walk this path in this relationship together. Was another moment where I set incredible freedom for myself, and I watched my business grow. I got so many more opportunities, because the moment I stopped denying the real truth or trying to hide from it, you can't bring about what you want if you're focused on what you don't want all the time. So I found that was also a massive change that has given me, well, it's a hard thing. I mean, but notice that this is not the thing I'm talking about as being a really painful experience now. It's actually, it was a very loving experience. And I don't know that I could have done that had I done this work.
Amazing. Because that was the news that I heard, that you were separating, and I was like, oh my gosh, what's happened since we last spoke? So a lot of time processing and a lot of growth. And again, hearing that you lost 30 pounds as well. I mean, some people just don't believe it because when people have done all the diets and done all the exercise and the weight's not shifting or it just keeps coming back, it's usually emotional. And I have seen it over and over again when people just do the emotional work, there's no dietary or exercise advice, and it just falls off them.
Yes, I feel like it was, I can't even describe how powerful it was. And it gave me freedom in my body, freedom in my relationships, freedom for me to stop hiding and to be the powerful version of myself at my highest capacity. And so I'm so very thankful that life brought us together.
Oh, yeah. Well, I believe that we cross paths with everyone for a reason. And I'm just so happy that you got these results, and it's opened your mind to the energetics, because I don't normally talk a lot about energetics in a really woo-woo kind of way, but there is something in this work when you shift those emotions. Emotions are energy. When you shift these emotions out of your body, it doesn't mean that you forget people or you forget things, but when you don't store it in your body, people perceive you differently. It's why we find certain people attractive when we walk past them, or we're repelled by them, or we know when they're in a happy mood or they're in a sad mood. So it's no surprise to me that all the other amazing things happened in your life, like your business opening up, your relationship changing. So yes, maybe in the moment it's challenging, but you can look back on it and go, wow, that it is an opportunity and it's led me on this path of growth. And there's going to be so many other things that open up for you as well.
I know I'm going to keep doing the work here. I think that's the most important thing. You're not one and done. You got lots of stuff to go through. And so I'm so glad to have you in my life to be a good guide for this.
Oh, it's so awesome to connect. Do you have anything else to share with us?
I don't. I think that the most, the big thing I would say is anybody who's listening is that I really believe that, just like Jen talked about, we find the right people in our lives. There's a reason why you're listening to this message right now, which is saying that there's something in here for you to hear. So whether it's around your career or it's around the pain or the manifestation of what's happening in your body, that it's probably time to stop doubting and to start doing.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Thanks for learning with me on the Art of Listening to Your Body podcast. If you like what you've heard, I would love if you could rate, review, and share with your friends. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. My handle is The Art of Listening to Your Body. If you're interested in working with me, I offer online courses for the general public and trainings for practitioners, therapists, and coaches. I also open limited one-to-one coaching spaces throughout the year. If you would like to find out more, head to my website, drjinong.com.